Welcome to the Haven Collective. I'm JR, and this is the Beacon Bit. Today we're talking about Luke 13. It's a parable that Jesus tells about a fig tree and a gardener. You might remember, if you've been around Haven back when we were in the Catalyst days, that Nathan and I did a skit on the show Undercover Boss. I'm sure we'll go ahead and drop the link in the comments down there if you didn't see it. Or you want to see it again, because let's be honest, it was incredible. I find shows like that interesting because the payoff for them is watching people get what they deserve at the end, right? So there's always this big reveal at the end of the show where the guy, takes off all his makeup stuff. He's like, it was me, the boss, all along. And then the people who were particularly faithful in their jobs get some kind of nice reward. And then the people who were terrible employees get punished. And there's something that we enjoy about watching that happen. I think it's interesting because it does uphold this kind of morality that we hope is the case, right? Those of us who want to see karma happen, or we want to see people get their just desserts. We want this idea that the people who do right are going to get rewarded and the people who do bad things are going to get punished. But I think it's interesting that in this parable today, Jesus does something a little different. And it's interesting, particularly, I think, in the context of Christian nationalism that we've been talking about. Because again, as we have been looking at throughout this series during Lent, at the idol of Christian nationalism, at the number of people that many of us know and love and care about who have fallen under the sway of Christian nationalism, who are either advocating for, supporting, or at least approving of some terrible, awful, and decidedly unchristian things that the current administration is doing in the name of Jesus, we probably imagine that we want to see them punished. And so Jesus tells us this story where there's a landowner who represents God, who has this person who's in charge of taking care of their crops, right? The farmer, the gardener. I'm just going to call them the gardener, okay? Though again, this was likely some kind of big farm that they're running, right? And then there's this fig tree that does not do what a fig tree is supposed to do, which is produce fruit. Now, this is actually a common metaphor for the people of God and their faithfulness or lack thereof that goes all the way back through the Hebrew prophets. That God imagines them as a tree, and if God's people are being faithful, then the tree is talked about as producing fruit. If they're not being faithful, then it's a tree that's not producing fruit. And so in this particular story, the landowner comes, they see this fig tree, it's been there for a few years, well past the days that it should have started to produce figs, and it's not. And so he says, you know what? The fig tree isn't producing figs, tear it up, throw it on the fire to be burned. Again, this is a pretty common understanding of God's justice. When God returns, God will see who's being faithful and who's not, who's bearing fruit and who's not. And those who are will be rewarded. Those who are not will be given what they deserve. It's a sort of a classic like undercover boss sort of thing, right? God comes back and pulls off the bald cap and the beard all falls out and he's like, ho, 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 it's me, God, And again, I think we're supposed to feel this kind of like joy and thrill at finally the people who have been profaning God's name and harming others in the name of God will get what's coming to them. But do you notice that Jesus does something very different with this parable? He has this character of the gardener who comes in and says, please, sir, give me some more time, right? Give me another year with this tree. That's profound. And if I can say something provocative myself, I think that's where Haven is being called right now, right? We are seeing these people in our culture who claim the name of Jesus who are not bearing the fruit of Jesus, who are instead, again, orchestrating, approving of, or endorsing harm being done on so many other people, on our world, on the earth, in the name of Jesus. And I think what many of us want to do is sit back and cross our arms and wait for God to give them what they deserve. But maybe we're being called to be like this gardener, to plead and say, hey, give us some time. Give us some time with these people. Give them a little bit more time. What I think is the most provocative is that the gardener doesn't say, I think the tree just needs another year and it'll come around. Right? We're just going to leave it by itself and hope that things get better. No, he says, I'm going to fertilize it. I'm going to prune it. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that this tree becomes fruitful the way it was supposed to. And so I think what Haven is being called to in a similar way is to engage those people in our orbits, in our city, in our families, in our workplaces, in our friend groups who would identify as Christian nationalist or who would align themselves with the tenets and the ideals of Christian nationalism. And not just say, God, give them some time, let them come around, they'll figure it out eventually, but rather to get in and get our hands dirty, right? To do the work. And I think we all know what fertilizer is made out of, right? It's not glamorous. It's not beautiful, desirable work. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be smelly. It's going to be difficult. But this is a powerful and provocative image of what we have the opportunity to do with those who are in our orbits who are not bearing fruit. Now, I think there's a lot to unpack here, and so I'm really looking forward to diving into it in our beacons together this week. And I think this is going to be a difficult conversation, but that's why I'm so grateful for our beacons, for that space that we have to create some relational risks. So I'm going to be meditating on this between now and then. I know that you are too, and I cannot wait to talk about what it looks like for us to be faithful gardeners in the midst of an epidemic of Christian nationalism in our beacons this coming Sunday. Until then, grace and peace be with you.